Okay, open access is really about making the scholarship and the publications of universities easily accessible to anybody in the world without financial barriers of access.
Open access is sort of worldly, and in the global world known as two ways of, or two pillars. The pillars of open access is the institutional repositories on the one hand side. On the other hand, it is the publishing of articles into open access journals, or the publishing of open access journals per se. And that's known as the green route, which is the institutional repositories, and the gold route, which is open access journals.
The role of open access in the university is really to disseminate the knowledge that's created in the university as widely as possible, with as few barriers to access as possible. At Rhodes, it doesn't mean that we turn our back on more conventional media, journal media particularly, but it means that what we want to do is use easy to access platforms as much as we can get, as much as possible.
I think the most important advantage is that at least it ensures access to information and free access to information. So it's not hidden behind a toll access model whereby you have to pay to view. I think that's the biggest benefit. But I think what it also brings about is that research is indexable, accessible, visible to the rest of the world.
The issue of incentive for me is a non-issue, because publishing in an open access forum doesn't necessarily mean that these are journals that are not accredited. These are all accredited journals. So whatever incentive you got publishing in a traditional journal, you would get publishing in an open access journal. So the incentives for me is a non-issue. But at the same time, academics were able to access relevant content to support their research. And that for me is a distinct advantage that the academics can have in this open access process.
I think Rhodes as an institution is well positioned to be a proponent of open access. We have already signed the Berlin Declaration in support of open access. We have our institutional repository. We ensure that all the master's thesis and dissertations, PhD dissertations, are available on the institutional repository. We're very, very fastidious about the quality of the repository and how it's managed and the collections. The other issue is we create awareness of open access and the implications for academics, etc. So I think as a library, we're very well positioned also to take the lead and to work collaboratively with the research office and academics to promote open access.
The impact has been large, and the literature is full of examples of the impact that it has. It's certainly for South African journals and for South African researchers. It has put them out there. It has made them quite visible, and through the Cielo South Africa platform, definitely more.
The visibility of the output has grown exponentially. We've seen where articles that have been published, that have been cited at least 3 to 5 times more. So in terms of that, visibility has grown exponentially, and researchers have benefited from that exponential growth. By the same token, the institutions have also gained from that exponential growth because their researchers have showcased their institution to the rest of the world. By the same token, when research is available to society, society then becomes more knowledgeable. And a typical example not too long ago was this whole issue of donkey meat. And Stellenbosch University put out their article in the repositories. And the people that downloaded that article were more from society than from fellow researchers. So society benefited, so they knew what the whole issue of donkey meat was, and were then making informed choices about where do they buy their meat. That is a simple example to show how society has benefited from open access.
I think government plays an important role. I think they're the leadership, they're also the policy makers, and it's important for them to understand what is the role and the impact of open access before it can actually trickle through the whole research system as such. So they have to be leaders and to believe what is the impact and the value of open access as such. In terms of the policies they make, especially in terms of publicly funded research to be published in an open access format, and definitely in terms of providing infrastructure as well as some financial support for a model like that. I think this is extremely important, and I think specifically from ASA's point of view, especially within the government, there's a lot of promotion on all sorts of bilaterals with all the BRICS countries. So there's a huge emphasis within government that we should cooperate, collaborate with each other. So this is another vehicle through the CLO South Africa platform, is that we create collaboration, and not only collaboration, but that we make visible all the research being published in Southern Hemisphere countries. And I think that's what I like about the CLO project, is that it's South American, South Africa, which will be extended to India and to China as well eventually. We hope that will actually then just complete the whole circle. So I think it's an important vehicle to...
As the developing world has been losing a lot of its intellectuals to the Western world, primarily because of the poor infrastructure, also because of the fact that access to support, literature to support the thesis or that innovation was not there. What open access can do is it can reverse that brain drain, in the sense that South Africa is ideally placed because we have the IT infrastructure, we have the technology, we have a very strong culture of research production, and we have the raw data. So in that combination, we can produce research and get those that have left the country to come back and to produce knowledge and to export that knowledge to the rest of the world. So we must now work towards producing more knowledge rather than reading the knowledge produced by the developed world.